It's November 29th, and this is an interview with Shirley Quant in Prineville, Oregon. Mr. Quant, what year were you born?
February 1st, 1915, in Mitchell.
In Mitchell, Oregon.
Mitchell, Oregon.
All right. Can you tell me when you moved to Prineville?
Moved to Prineville in 1938.
So you were how old then?
Well, I was born in 15, so it would have been about 1938. I'd have been 20, about 23, 24 years old.
All right. What brought you to Prineville?
Well, like I said, born in Mitchell, then we left the country, went to the coast for a while, come back in 1930. That's when I went to work on the ranch up there, starting logging. But we actually didn't plan on moving back up at the time, but my dad worked for the Forest Service up there from 1914 to 1918 up on Pisgah. One of the first rangers in the Ocho is what he was. And his job was routing 3 points up there for fire watch. The north rim of Pisgah, east point of Pisgah, and the main top of Pisgah. He went to work in 1914 up there.
So your father brought you back here when he worked?
In 1929, he brought us back up here to show us where he worked for the Forest Service, to show us the country, to show us Mitchell where I was born. So when we come back up here, we stopped up here in Summit Prairie, and they told us they needed some people in a mine up there. So we went to work at the mine during the summer of 1930. I went down to Mitchell and started the high school in 1930. Couldn't afford to go to high school, so I went to work on a rancher up there that logged from a little circle mill up there. So that's when I started doing my logging in the winter of 1930.
So how long did you work in the timber industry then?
I've worked in timber industry all my life.
Let's see.
Had my own logging outfit. The woods had been my whole life.
Who did you work for? Did you work for a company?
At that time when I first started, I was falling for a fellow by the name of Charlie Jackson, which Jackson's over at Mitchell. He's dead, been dead for years. Him and a guy by the name of Rube Rosenbaum put a little circle mill in up there, and needed somebody to cut the log for us. So a fellow by the name of Mac Nichols had a ranch up there and a bunch of horses, so we took the job producing logs. So I helped cut the logs and log them with the horses, and we had 2 mules and 4 horses.
What was that like?
Like?
What did you like that kind of work?
Oh, I loved it. That's all I ever did do, is work in the woods. You know, so I got old enough to pull a crosscut. That's how we cut it all in, the crosscut, you know, the hand saw.
Yes.
Had to chop all them ends. And then in the wintertime, we used a sled, had it built on a sled. We put the one end of the logs on and cross-hauled them. And in summertime, we set of wheels to skid them in with. Sometimes we had to skid them for a mile into the mill, see. And Mac had these horses broke the log, and they knew more about logging than we did. They'd come to a hill and start down it. In the wintertime especially, the log would take off, the horses outrun it. When they cut them out, they'd start to slow up and go right on with them, see.
So it sounds like the horses were
They
well
broke
trained.
in and knew just as much about logging as we did, you know.
Did you work for a particular company or?
No, a fellow named Mac Nichols owned the ranch. He was furnishing logs to this mill, and a fellow named Rube Rosenbaum had the sawmill. And he cut numbers for all the ranchers around there, and then he hauled some into Prineville and sold it.
All right. So was that when you were still in Mitchell?
Still in Mitchell.
When you came to Prineville, who did you work for?
I went to work for Alexander Yawkey. It was at that time Alexander Stewart later, and now it's American Molding out here. At that time, Tom Yawkey from back in Boston, and a guy out of Chicago somewhere, by the name of Alexander. They owned all this big timber block, about 65,000 acre timber out here. So they put the mill in, and when they first put them in, they didn't put the mill in. They put mills out in the woods, and they cut them down in tree length, yard them in, limb them, and cut them in saws at the mill. They had 3 mill sites, one on Willow Creek, one on Allen Creek, and one on Mackay Creek. And they yard them in with, they had old-time caterpillars, and they had arch, what they call arch behind them. Had 2 tracks like a cat. Didn't have any cleats in them, but then they had a big arm, just went a big arm went up behind with a line went through it, you could drum on, they could hook onto these trees and yard them into tree length. And took them down the mill and had men down there cutting them up. And so we fell them tree length then.
Oh my, that must have been an amazing...
It was. They didn't pay much money then, but they had good money compared to what the other thing was.
Do you remember how much money you earned an hour?
Well, when I worked over there in Mitchell, I never got anything. Only the rancher I was working for, he had a lot of livestock, and my family, my folks lived in Mitchell then. So I'd get work out a cow, or maybe a couple of pigs or some chickens. They kept me in all kinds of livestock. Not no money much, though. You didn't have any money them days. And we worked there at Yawkees. We got, I don't remember, recall exactly how much. They didn't pay by the, I think they paid by the hour, if I remember right, because they didn't have any way of scaling them. You're supposed to be scaled in the wood to pay by the scale, by the thousand.
Right.
We got paid so much an hour for falling. It's all done with a crosscut, the old handsaw.
Right. Do you remember, do you have any idea of how much you earned an hour?
Well, I would say an hour, I would say $1.50, $2 an hour.
And that was probably very good wage.
That was good wages then, because wages in the mill was 65 cents an hour.
What year about was that?
1938. But before that, now I got heads on a little bit here. Before that, Hudspeth come out from Oklahoma and put in a mill over at Camp Watson.
Hudspeth? John
Hudspeth used to be sawmill, Hudspeth, the big outfit. They put in a mill up at Camp Watson. We up there fell timber for them, but we cut it in short logs, 16-foot logs or whatever they'd make. And then they did scale. They're supposed to scale, but if you set number 2, you put 2 notches into the log. Then set number 3, you put 3 notches. And then when they went up the ramp, they're supposed to scale and write them down, who it was. And they logged the horses too then.
When did the scaling part of that change in the timber industry?
Well, I get further south and on the coast they were scaled before that probably, but Yawkees up here, I was saying about 1939, somewhere around there.
How long did you work for Alexander Yawkey?
Oh, we worked for them for about, I would say 4, maybe 5 years. And then we quit. The war broke out, and they couldn't get timber forward, so they gave us deferments. So I went to work for Pine Products Corporation up here. They was logging for, Endicott was the logger for Pine Products. So we got paid first we got paid by the hour, and then they come out with what they call a first power saw that ever come on the market. It was run by electric. Can you imagine electric out there?
I can.
They had a little D4 cab with a generator on it, and then they had a long cable run off that, and then they had a saw, electric saw with their blade on it, and had a man run the cat and pull the cable, and we fell all the timber for one sawmill here on that deal. I went up to Burns. The first one come in the country was up in Burns, and I went up there and spent 2 days up there learning how to run the saw and file the chain.
Did that make your job easier?
Oh yeah, from then on all we done is fall, and then they had buckers behind us with a crosscut to buck behind us. We didn't fall. Other than fall, they had three men of us done the falling. One guy pulling cable around the cat, and two of them the saw, my brother and I. We felled all the timber for the pine product sawmill with that one saw.
My goodness.
But then they started scaling, I'd say about 1939, I think, when they started scaling logs in up here at Milwaukee. Finally they moved the mills from their settings out in the woods, moved them into Prineville here, and then they hauled saw logs in, instead of cutting them out in the woods. But for years they cut everything out in the woods and yarded it into the great big cat into the landing, and that's where they bucked them and trimmed the limbs off from.
Do you remember about how many logs a day the little mills in the woods would handle?
Oh, they handled a lot of them. Of course, the mills those days were real slow compared to now. They didn't have the band mills at first. They had a circle mill, the circle blade, and they didn't cut that much. And then they had to have a ratchet setter. They rolled these logs up on a deal, put the platform, run back and forth on the track, and the man sat there and set what they call ratchets. He would set the logs, set the pins in to hold it, and they'd run the saw through it and cut the slabs off, which was a lot of weight at that time, And then the ratchet setter, when they had to kick the log over, they'd set the ratchets again on it until they sawed the log up that way. They were really slow in them days.
Do you remember the relative size of the trees that you cut?
All sizes. Of course, back when they first started cutting, they didn't cut the real small ones. And we cut the tree up pretty small at the top. The outfit moved, the guy named McKelly in the 30s moved the mill over here on West Branch on a big block of timber, and they just took them up to the limbs and left the rest of them in the woods.
They don't do that anymore, do they?
No, but them days we didn't take the little timber tall. The little ones do it. Anything to say from about 20 inches down we didn't cut.
What was the biggest tree that you remember cutting?
About 6 foot.
In diameter?
About 6 foot in diameter.
Alright. Is there anything left of those 3 mill sites that you were telling me about?
Yeah, you can see where they had the mill sitting out here on Willow Creek. Head of Willow Creek, it runs into Madras. And then on Allen Creek, it runs into Mackay Creek, and down to Mackay Creek. There's 3 settings out there. You can see where the old mill set all right there. You see where it set there.
Is there anything left? Any building or?
No, there isn't any old building left. I don't think of any of those sites. They just tore the old mill site down, and some of it was on private property, and they built some, on this one Mackay, they built some houses up there.
Oh.
There's some housing up there.
So no trace left?
No trace of it at all.
How does that make you feel?
Pardon?
How does that affect you?
Oh, I don't know. They done a better job then, really, than they do now, because they more or less selective logged. Now the Forest Service cuts little trees like this, and I don't believe in that at all.
When you say little trees like this?
Big enough to make a 2x4 per mirror.
Pretty little.
Oh, when they clear cut now, they take everything. And they shouldn't clear cut these mountains at all, no way. Because this timber that come here don't grow very fast. 50 years you ain't got a very big tree here, Well, on the west side you got a big tree in 50 years. Over here in the Ocho you don't have a very big tree in 50 years. So they just took the ripe timber out, more or less. The Forest Service started out that way too up there. And at one time the Forest Service up here was run by about five men each ranger station. And they marked the trees for the selective log. They picked out the ripe timber, and that's what they logged. Dead, down, and stuff that's ripe, And they have to good stand of timber. Nowadays they're going to wipe it clean.
Well, that's kind of radical for a logger to be talking against clear cutting. I would have thought loggers like that.
That's the worst thing ever happened in Eastern Oregon, the clear cut.
Really?
You can selective log and take the right timber out, and when you get through it, you still got a good stand of timber.
Why do companies do?
Well, the company don't do it much. The company don't do that. It's the Forest Service.
Why has the Forest Service allowed clear cutting?
I've never found out. I've always tried to find out where it come out of the head office somewhere, you know.
What do you think?
Probably out of Washington, D.C., probably.
Well, why do you
Portland, East Portland regional office, you know.
Why do you think they allow it, though? Why do you think?
Well, they started that on the coast, and then in the coast range where timber grows fast, you got lots of underbrush. They have the high need, which is a cable log, you know, and they tear down small stuff anyway, so they just clear cut it and replant it, which is all right because they grow fast down there. But up in this country, no high needs, all right, speak of, you know, and then, like I say, 50 years ago, we didn't have a very big tree in this country. What we call a bulljack, like this, you know.
About 2 feet in diameter?
Well, you're not going to have a 2-foot tree in 50 years. Real lucky to. Most of these trees 300 or 400 years old, these pine trees, you know.
So how has Prineville changed from the time that you first came here to now? What changes do you see?
When we first come here, 1938, had a brother-in-law that was a settlement cleaner for Yawkey up there, the big mill here north of town. So I worked there that winter because the snow too deep, and then next spring my brother and I went out to falling timber and have been falling timber ever since. That's all I've ever done.
But what was the town like in 1938?
About 1,500 people. You could pick up houses around here in the mid-30s for back taxes. Yeah, I knew several houses went for back taxes in the early 30s.
Why was that?
No industry here until they started putting these sawmills in. No industry. Cattle and sheep is about all there were, you know.
There was some controversy between the cattle and sheep owners and the timber workers. Do you know anything about that?
Well, the cattle and sheepmen had a war, you know. But as far as Forest Service, you had to have an allotment to put your stock in. They went with ranches, you know. When you got land and you put in, they'd give you an allotment. As long as there was allotments available in the mountains. Some of them ranches on the Mitchell side had 3 or 4 allotments, you know. They had 3 or 4 bands of sheep or a bunch of cattle. But they kept them separate. They had one part of the forest for cattle and the other part for sheep. And that's what my dad was doing when he was ranger up there from 14 to 14 along there, you know, 15, riding the cattle allotments, sheep allotments. There was a lot of sheep in the country at that time.
What was the war about? Do you remember that?
Open range. The cattlemen didn't seem to think that cattle would exist where sheep was at. You know, they wouldn't get along together, so they started killing the band of sheep. Even killed a few herders, you know.
Do you remember about what time period that might have been?
Yeah, that was the latter part of the 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay. Well before you were born.
Before I was born.
But there weren't any conflicts that you remember?
No, there was no trouble with the cattle and sheep. In fact, a lot of the old rancher on Mitchell had cattle and sheep both. Had them both in the mountain. But different parts of the forest. They had allotments made for the sheep and others for the cattle.
What do you remember about working for Alexander Yawkey? Was that a good company?
They had a good company to work for. Real fair, good company to work for. And then after I quit them, the war started, went to work for a guy named Endicott, who was doing the logging for Pine Product, doing all their logging for him. Bill and Fred Endicott. That's where I was at when I had been to Fernville Castlewood in the Army.
And did you stay with that company until you retired?
No, I didn't. I went to logging when I got out of the Army, 45.
So you did go to the Army after all?
Well, yeah, I enlisted and went. And then when I got out in 45, I went back to falling for Pine Products, for Endicott, who it was.
Okay.
And then I fell timber for up to about 1951. Then we bought an old cat, an ORD6 cat, went to logging down here on Mackay Creek, on some private timber. From then on, I kept adding on and off, and I had a pretty good sized logging outfit at one time. I had about 4 or 5 tractors and a couple of loading machines. Even went back to Colorado and tried to lost my shirt back there.
Why'd you go back to Colorado?
Well, some friend of mine was the Jackson outfit with them in the sawmill. They had pretty well-to-do family, got a big ranch over there, and they made a lot of money out of timber up here in Summit Prairie. They bought all the timber that Leo Hahn had around the edge of Prairie, and they sold it for a heck of a big profit to Pine Products. They paid $10 a thousand on the stump per 1,000 foot. They sold it for $50 a thousand, which was a lot of money. So they made a lot of money. So then they found out about this big deal back east, back in southern Colorado around Fort Garland, and they come to me and they had about 96,000 acres, I think, back there, timber island. I'm in logging for them. So I agreed to go back and log for them. And I went back there and took a bunch of equipment, built a bunch of roads, started logging. They didn't put in a sawmill. Left me holding the bag back there. It cost me thousands and thousands. I come back about $70,000 in debt. That was a lot of money then, Dave. But
Still
I paid it
is. So how long were you there?
Colorado, about 3 or 4 months.
When you came back here, you were an independent contractor.
Yeah, I was logging these properties that my daughter and son-in-law got. Re-logging them. They'd been logged once. One of them had been logged by husband. The other had been logged by a guy by the name of Kelly. I told you to cut them up to the land. So they left a lot of the good timber, so I went in and re-logged it for the rancher over there. A guy by the name of Dollarhide and another by the name of Conley Brothers. They had a sheep ranch, a cattle ranch. So that's when I started logging on my own. I had bought my own outfit, and then I logged for myself and for logged over sister too for a long time. I logged in about 4 or 5 years ago. Small job, ranch jobs around the country, a few 100,000 feet.
So you
I made good money, but I spent it.
it's easy to do.
Sure, you can't believe the difference in the log in them days. Of course, everything was sold with a crosscut, up to about, well, the first power saw in the country, I told you, was the electric saw. And they took me up to Burns. Endicott took me up to Burns. They had one working up at Burns. They took me up there to see how to run it and see how they work. So I went up there and spent 2 or 3 days up there to learn how to run this electric saw and file the chain. So then we done all the filing from Pine Product Mill with that one. So then they got what they call a distant, and twin cylinder distant weighed 130 pounds.
How can you spell that? Do you know how that's spelled? The distant?
D-I-S-T-O-N, I think. Distant,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
They're the twin cylinder. They're big heavy one. But they had, of course, they had a bar on them like they do nowadays. They got what they call a beaver tail. They, on the little end, you take a handle off, and you don't have to use the little now on the little end of the tall on the beaver tail. On them days, they had what's called the idler end, and you had every time you got hung up in a log, pinch, you couldn't get it out. You had to take that end off, chain everything, pull it out, put it back together.
Did you have to do that often?
Fairly often. And they had what they call a scratcher chain instead of a chisel bit like they have nowadays.
What's that? A scratcher chain?
A scratcher chain had a scratcher chain had a teeth come out like on a crosscut a lot. It wasn't quite the same shape. Had it cut in two on this side and had a raker in the middle to take the shavings out, And they was real particular to file. And when you go to pull them out of a cut, especially out of an undercut, cutting the undercut out, hit them a little bit, they'd catch it, they'd back up. Boy, if I had my leg just black, move one and the other, where that saw would kick you, But the beaver tail is different. You run that right straight under the tree. A lot of difference now in saws.
It was dangerous being out in the woods.
Always dangerous. You had to be careful. I got careless a few times, got down there and killed a time or two, I never got hurt, but I could have got killed real easy,
What happened?
Oh, you just get overconfident, Like one time, the nearest I ever come getting killed was following the crosscut out here on Mackay, or not Mackay, but head of South Creek. For Alexander Yawkey, we fell a great big tamarack in a thicket, had some arch, you know. It fell and went down the thicket this way. My brother on one side and I was on the other. He chopped left handed and I chopped right, so we didn't have to change side of the tree. Either handed, you know. And the tree started down. I thought, well, I didn't reach down and pick up something hard. I mean, I just jumped over where he's at, and the darn big tamarack come right back down on one side the other, and where I've been standing about that big around, just chunk itself. Didn't mash me in the ground. Just that close. I didn't even look up. I just jumped when he hollered.
You were lucky.
I was really lucky, yeah. And then with the crosscut, the old crosscut day, of course you had to chop all the limbs off. Then when you get what they call a tree in a vine, you cut it across the draw, you know, and it didn't break, but in a vine this way, you'd stick a saw and you get the pieced together, the tree pieced together. So then we always had two axes. So my brother would take one axe and he'd stick it under the log this way, and he would refer to the bucket down about so deep at the top, and we'd start from the bottom and under bucket till it broke. I'd be chopping the limbs off while I done that. It was a job. I think we probably held the record for the most scale ever cut with two men out here. For Yawkey had in the office out there, we averaged 48,000 a day for 2 weeks one time.
Wow.
Boy, we worked. 7.5, 8 hours a day, and I mean we worked. Different did nowadays with a power saw. The old horse and logging days was something though. You couldn't believe it. Like I say, these horses. I remember I had a black horse with him and Prince. Had a big white horse, the most beautiful horse I ever saw. But somebody wind broke him, you know. He'd work hard, but he'd get breathing so hard he couldn't hardly stand it, you know. His lungs was bad.
Oh.
Eagle, they called him. A great big white horse. Oh, he had a beautiful animal. We was 4 horses and 2 mules to log with. And then if you only had one man, didn't have anybody help you fall, you could buck all right by yourself, you know. One man could buck without a man on the other end. And you get a limb all right by one man, you chop the limbs off. When it comes to falling, you'd have to use what they call a rubber man. Take either a stick and drive the other side, or usually carried a rod just for that purpose, just working by yourself. You'd drive it in the ground, then you'd take a strip of inner tube and tie onto it, and you'd tie it on the handle of your saw, and you'd pull it this way, and that rubber would pull it back.
Oh my.
That's what they call rubber man.
Rubber man.
So one man could fall a tree by himself, you know.
Was that a fairly typical technique?
Oh, it didn't have to too often, because you usually had a partner, and if your partner got sick or hurt, why, if you had several sets of followers, why, one guy would double up with them, you know, work with them.
Did you have the same partner for a long time?
Yeah, my brother and I worked together for years and years.
How many years?
We actually started falling probably about 1931 for that little mill. And then...
you were just a young man then.
About 16. I started high school in 1930 and couldn't afford to go, so I quit and went to work in the woods. So then he was about a year and a half older than I was. But he worked with him most of the time when I was falling.
When you say you couldn't afford going to school, did it cost money to go to school?
No, it didn't cost money. I went to high school over in Mitchell, believe it or not. And couldn't make it, working on the ranches for $1 a day, you know, $1.25 a day while you're getting the wages out there during the Depression. So they can make more money felling timber. So we, like I say, we fell for hood, but the first year they came out of Oklahoma and had the mill over there at the side of Mitchell there at Cap Watson. Yeah.
What, did you ever work for any other companies then?
Oh, I worked for a lot of companies falling. Yeah, I worked for Oakshire Lumber Company. They got the first gas saw, power saw come in, they got 2 of these distance I was telling you about. Mercury, and didn't have anybody run them, so they come over and got us to go help get started with them big saws. They weigh 130 pounds, one man had to carry pretty all of it because your motor was on the right on your handle, and they had the bar, and then the other had either end that the other man held on to, cut. So we worked for them for a while, helped them get started out with their power saws, with their electric saws.
I'm going to stop this and switch the tape over now.
Okay.
Because we're right at the end.